Dan Wootton, I've been meaning to make some videos about Dan Wootton for a long time, and then I listen to the rubbish he spurts out, and I think I can't really be bothered. But this time, I'm going to, or rather, I'm not going to focus on Dan Wootton. I'm going to focus on Calvin Robinson. He's the fellow who dresses up as a priest, and he's a fellow who used to have extraordinary hair, and now he's almost got no hair. He looks like Tintin without the quiff, and without Snowy the dog. But what he does in his spare time, I suppose, shouldn't bother us. But instead of dealing with the instigation to riot, with the responsibility of the right wing, Calvin Robinson blames James O'Brien and Farage. He calls this the he calls James O'Brien a leftist troll, and says that he simply wants clicks. I don't think he wants clicks at all. I don't think he's in the click brigade. He's already got his LB, whatever it is, LBT or London. Well, anyway, he's got his radio station. I don't think he's into clicks. So he's blamed for being interested in clickbait, and Farage is blamed for being intellectually dishonest. Listen to what Calvin Robinson's got to say. I must point out I have skin in the game here, because when Calvin Robinson resigned from GB News, I did reach out, and I wasn't expecting the rebuff and the contempt that he seemed to have. But, you know, you win some, you lose some. He says that Farage and these are the Farage-O'Brien riots, and that rather than solving the problems, these two are stoking the flames, and that he says, be angry, but don't do violence. And he gets upset about the blaming of Tommy Robinson, and well, he may have a he may have some justification for saying that Tommy Robinson has talked about anger and has not talked about violence. I don't know. I've not listened to all of Tommy Robinson's stuff, and I've not found most of Tommy Robinson's stuff. But this comes down to this stochastic terrorism thing for this, that Tommy Robinson doesn't need to say very much. Farage doesn't need to say very much to trigger a response.
That sounds lovely, doesn't it? What a great guy. What a beautiful video James O'Brien had just watched. Until online sleuths discovered the actual video that he was referring to. Watch.
Is it that you're targeting our mosques? Why is it that you're targeting our Muslim women and our Muslim community? It's because your Zionist backers, they've got a certain agenda that they're trying to push. Oh, British people, wake up.
So that's the lovely guy. That's the lovely guy who James O'Brien thinks we should be celebrating at the moment. Of course, when it was pointed out, cue a desperate backpedaling apology to keep his job, I referenced this clip on the show today. O'Brien wrote on X while watching it live in the studio, I didn't watch it to the end. Obviously, the reference to Zionist backers is obnoxious and anti-Semitic. My apologies. Now, James O'Brien is the most divisive man in Britain. He stokes so much chaos and carnage, and it's disgusting the way he apportions blame, and the most intellectually dishonest. So much has happened since you were last on the show just a week ago, and there's a lot to pick up on, but I want to kick off with your take on Nigel Farage being blamed by an intellectually dishonest James O'Brien for causing these riots, when Mr. O'Brien, as I've proven, is actually seemingly the one pushing people who have incredibly divisive messages.
You see, just as Farage doesn't need to say a great deal to trigger that response from his followers, so too Calvin Robinson, the man who dresses up as a priest, he doesn't need to say very much, and I don't imagine he has a lot of followers. But there are people who hang on his every word. And I think the fact that he's got a dog collar on and has this patina of religiosity probably gives him a lot more power than, say, Dan Wootton, who is just a sort of grinning, gurning individual who used to be very good at reading auto cue. Now he's doing his own material. And there's lots of stories about Dan Wootton, and we can go into all of those at a later day. Let me just pass on to Calvin Robinson. But you know, this is the problem. These people don't need to say anything in order to have an effect, because they already have a reputation. And it doesn't matter really what they deny or what they say. It's how they are understood. In the same way, when you're looking at somebody who says something racist, they can say, "Oh, I didn't mean it. It was just a joke." Or, as Farage says, "Oh, it was just a joke." It doesn't matter. It's how it is understood. And that's a difficult point to reconcile. How it is understood. How Farage's wank or wink, is understood. I don't know how I got the wrong. I don't know how I got the wrong vowel in there. A wink and a nod. We have to quickly go on to Calvin Robertson, because I think there's too much. I'm so sorry.
They're both right. These are the Farage O'Brien riots, actually. That's what I'm going with. These are the Farage O'Brien riots, because they're both as bad as each other. They're both stirring up, one from the left, one from the right, stirring up tensions, not helping the problem, not coming up with solutions, not working with the people on the ground who are trying to make a difference, but stoking the flames for their own political game. James O'Brien for clicks, for views, because he's a leftist troll. Nigel Farage for similar, but from the right. He's a careerist who's out there to protect his own ambitions, throwing Tommy Robinson under the bus like that. James O'Brien blames Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage blames Tommy Robinson. Left blames right. Right blames right. It's actually ridiculous. When Tommy Robinson has been on and on about do not be violent, and people like myself have been saying the same thing. Be angry. We're all angry. We're frustrated.
In fact, today, or was it yesterday? Yesterday, Louise Carpenter wrote an article in the Telegraph, and this offered a more detailed examination of Tommy Robinson, this controversial British far-right activist. And the piece explores his rise to prominence, his activities, and the support he's garnered, particularly from figures like Jordan Peterson and platforms like Twitter. His narrative has been framed as a struggle for free speech. His supporters argue that he brings attention to issues like grooming gangs, which they feel are underreported due to political correctness. And he's managed to reach places that other media hasn't got to. He's used social media to amplify his voice, reaching that broader audience. And the article notes his significant following and the large viewership of his content and therefore of his influence. And despite his controversial past, he's managed to attract support from influential figures like Steve Bannon, Jordan Peterson, enhancing his credibility. And Peterson's podcast in particular provided Robinson with a platform to present his side of the story to millions. His background includes leadership roles in the English Defence League, the EDL, and associations with other far-right groups. His rhetoric has often been inflammatory, targeting Muslims and contributing to social division, and he's not stepped back from any of that. His history of legal issues, including convictions for assault and libel, undermines his credibility, but now has got to the point where it makes him into a martyr for the right, and the police obsession with tracking him down and detaining him simply keeps him in the news, and it's wrong. There's a big difference between Tommy Robinson and Julian Assange. Julian Assange was actively doing something, not necessarily what you would want, but he was actively doing something. Tommy Robinson is not really doing very much at all. He is responding to this police obsession, and it's the police who keep him in the spotlight. The article connects Robinson to the recent riots, suggesting that his inflammatory posts and conspiracy theories have contributed to the public disorder, and this highlights the potential danger of his influence. I wish he had simply gone away. But he hasn't, and because he has moved from being an ordinary human being to being an icon, he doesn't really need to do anything. And we now face this really strange situation. Has he actually said anything? And this issue of stochastic terrorism. Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage both exemplify this new breed of political figure whose significance transcends their actions. They've become symbols, rallying points for broader movements. Robinson in particular, an icon for far-right activism, with his persecution enhancing his stature among supporters. And this phenomenon mirrors Farage's role in Brexit, where his mere presence and his past actions continue to influence public sentiment and political activities. And of course, Farage is the most spectacular speaker. And the hounding of Robinson, as detailed by Carpenter, has paradoxically augmented his iconography. He represents a martyr for free speech to his followers, regardless of the legality or morality of his actions, a little bit like Trump. And this transformation into a symbol means that figures like Robinson and Farage do not need to engage actively in politics to remain influential. Their legacy and the emotions they evoke are enough to galvanize their base, often with negative consequences. Louise Carpenter's article provides a comprehensive look at Tommy Robinson. I do recommend it, highlighting both the support he garners and the controversies he incites. His ability to remain relevant and influential, despite or perhaps because of his legal troubles and far-right associations, underscores a troubling dynamic in contemporary politics. And figures like Tommy Robinson become larger than life, their influence perpetuated by a combination of persecution and an adept use of the media, creating a legacy that continues to affect society, often detrimentally. And, of course, as far as I know, there's no connection between Tommy Robinson and Calvin Robinson. They are both very different individuals, but they are both linked to this same thing. And Calvin Robinson himself is fast becoming an icon of the right. Let's
Do
go
not
back
be
to him.
violent. And Nigel Farage, what does he do? Comes on camera and says, "Yeah, the Tommy Robinsons, they're the ones causing the violence." Well, no, actually, it's the Nigel Farages and the James O'Briens with their back and forth ping pong of politics, with us, all of us normal Brits, caught in the middle.
And the thing about Tommy Robinson, Calvin, that I have found particularly egregious over the past few days is that the media tried to say that he fled the country after his Uniting the Kingdom event, which was completely peaceful, by the way, in Trafalgar Square. But actually, he was on a pre-planned holiday with his family. He didn't flee the country. He was taking the kids away. And if he really wanted to be behind some form of violence, he wouldn't have left the country, would he?
As I say, it's dog eat dog here. Dan Wootton and Calvin Robinson, who are both disgraced ex-members of the GB News squad and involved in resigning over inappropriate remarks made by Lawrence Fox, and Calvin Robinson suspended and subsequently sacked after publicly supporting Dan Wootton on social media. Calvin Robinson is another person who, as I say, has been fingered as a rabble-rouser, and whether he is or not, I have no idea. He's certainly trying to blame someone else anyway.